I think you'll see today that we are finally into 2022 complaints, and that I hope, with your help, that this is not a 9-hour session like the first one was, or a 7-hour session like the second one was, but we have fewer complaints, and I'm hoping that this, while it will be multi-hour, I'm hoping that it's not as long as we've been in the past, because in fairness to the people who do the investigations and the reporting they have to do at this meeting, and in fairness to you, that I know you love being here, or at least want to be here and are interested enough to be here. I want to be respectful of your time, and while the meetings in the past that were very long were necessary, I hope that we don't have to get into a pattern of that.
It was reported that there were incidents of non-resident voting with a fake address, and allegations that the elected mayor didn't reside within the city limits. The complaint also includes an allegation that there were early votes placed by people outside the city. The complaint alleges that one candidate paid for coffee for an elector if they came with his or her voting sticker and took a photo with him. They could then take their voting sticker to a local coffee shop and would receive a free cup of coffee or a snow cone.
All right, Ms. Gazelle.
We are privy to the investigation files that are not public, and it became clear to me when I was reading the files here that the allegations were not made in good faith. And I say that because there was a specific allegation that a street address was a fraudulent address being used by multiple people residing there. When the investigator went, he discovered not only was there an apartment building at this specific address, but one of the complainants had previously lived at that address. So the complainant said it was a fraudulent address, knowing that that was not true. So I wanted to point out that I wanted to discuss this a little bit more openly, because there are no repercussions right now for complainants that are made in bad faith, knowing that the information that they are complaining to is false, and they are in fact alleging that voters have conducted illegal activity when they have not. If they put that in writing, that is potentially libelous. And I just, this case made me upset, and I wanted to bring it out to discuss it, because it is a very serious thing to allege that a voter has committed fraud. And when those allegations are not done in good faith, when they are done for some other purpose to undermine the outcome of an election, I believe that there should be repercussions. And so I wanted to discuss it in this session.
Anybody else have a comment along those lines?
Unfortunately, we've seen a pattern of this. This is not the first time that we've seen something like this. We've seen other situations in which complaints have been made, and upon investigation, the voter acted totally appropriately. And it showed either a willingness on behalf of the complainant to file a false complaint, or a failure of their part to do any kind of minimal investigation before filing a complaint. I believe there's even a lawsuit as a result of one of those. I don't know what the answer is in terms of, on one side we want people who see something that is questionable to alert the Secretary of State's office to do an investigation. And on the other side, we don't want to see a chilling effect take place, either against a particular voter or attempt to question the validity of an election. I think it merits further investigation in terms of what other states do. I'm sure other states have faced similar issues. Georgia I don't believe has any such law that deals with complaints that are filed in bad faith. But I do think something needs to be done, because we are seeing a pattern of conduct taking place. And I share in your concerns. I'm not sure what the answer is, though, to be candid. But I do think it probably merits us taking a look, perhaps before the next meeting in February, to see what kind of recommendations we would make to the General Assembly while it's still in session.
Any other comments?
That said, Mr. Chairman, I'd be moved to dismiss.
Well, let me make my comment before we move to the motion. I think we have two responsibilities. One is to look at claims substantive violations of the law or rules and to hold people accountable when that happens, which is generally what we do. But I share the concern that there are actually two types of people that file complaints which corrupt the system itself. And those are people who make statements, and I think there's a statement in our complaint, if you file a complaint online, which we are going to require in the future, that you make it under penalty of perjury, although we don't make them swear. So the question is whether or not that's perjurious. And then there are a number of people that just file complaints without a scintilla of information that shows that there is anything even to investigate. And both of those are unfair to the people, and it's not just for the people that are accused to have to go through this process, including coming down here to see whether or not as a respondent they're going to be sanctioned or their case is really going to be dismissed. As you notice, the only way a case can be dismissed is by us. It's a recommendation that comes from the investigator, but so even if they see that they're on the lesser category, it doesn't mean that that's going to happen. So what would I do? I would come down and see if I have to defend myself. You know, at least under federal law, if you file a writing or make a statement to a law enforcement investigator, that can be a false official statement for which there's a criminal consequence. I don't know, Charlene, whether there's anything, if somebody files a complaint with a state agency and that complaint is untrue, whether there's, maybe that's something that we can look at to see what a remedy might be for somebody who does that. Okay, so I wholly endorse that we begin looking at people to maintain the integrity of the complaint-making process and to protect the reputations of people who are unjustly accused of something, requiring them to go through this process, which regrettably takes longer than it should, so that they live under the cloud of that until it's disposed of. So I think that we ought to put that as an item for the next agenda in February, and that we, with Ms. McGowan's assistance, to see what what the alternatives are available to us to hold somebody responsible. Until then, I'm inclined to send a letter by the board to these particular complainants. I'll have to go through and work with Ms. Koth to see where it is that somebody made something that was specific enough to have been false or allegedly false, and just say that the responsibility in filing a complaint is to be truthful, that they told us when they filed it that they were truthful, but there are facts that are apparently in direct contradiction, which would show that they may not be truthful, and at least tell them that they have to be careful, but that we elect not to take any specific action at this time. Is that acceptable to everybody?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, let me say this, Ms. Gazelle. I think in a short period of time, we've begun to see patterns in the things where we see things that aren't necessarily violations, but I think it's our responsibility to do what you did today, and I thank you for doing that, which is to begin looking at the system as a whole and trying to improve it, not necessarily by acting on a specific complaint. And I appreciate that very much. You will do more of that in 2023.